This is a live reading of Grigori Grabovoi's The Resurrection of People and Eternal Life from Now On is Our Reality. I'm Stephen Walters. This is not an AI reading. This is me reading this. This is Chapter 2, Section 2. We now proceed to the principles of the second level. The first principle is virtually obvious. Man is an eternal substance by the principle of his creation. That is why resurrection is based on revealing the eternal in man. In parentheses 2.1. The next principle substantiates the importance of the development of the spirit. There is interdependence between the spiritual and physical structures. By changing the information on the physical structure in the sphere of the spirit, we can change the spirit to the level when it will be available to change any physical structure, as well as to create a physical body. In parentheses 2.2. By raising the spirit to the level when it will be able not to just change the physical structure, but also to create it, and to create, among other things, a physical body as well. As consequence, we have that man can always stay alive. And if man is able to sustain life of his own body forever, if he is able to always stay alive, he, therefore, can resurrect others. The next principle. Time and space do not limit the duration of life. The concept of duration of life is formed by the relation of the spirit to space and time. Parenthesis 2.3. In the previous segment, we clarified what the soul, the spirit, and the consciousness are. Now we will continue the discussion of the terms used, and I will say a few words about space and time. Space. Space, like time, is a consciousness construct. Space is a structure for the realization of the acts of the soul, as well as of the spirit, of consciousness, of the body. There is soul space, there is spirit space. There is space of consciousness, and there is space of the body. The space of the body is the space within which the body moves. That is, it is a normal physical space. The space of the soul is a structure of the world organization, and the concept of the physical space is inapplicable there. The space of the soul has a priority over other spaces. I will note that the soul space is secondary towards the soul itself. The soul is the base. The soul exists in a certain absolutized space, where God created it. But the spirit exists in the space of action, and here, space is associated with the concept of consciousness. When a person thinks of something, it happens in the space of thinking. Space can be both individual and collectivized. Every person has his own individual space of thinking, but when several people, let's say in a movie theater, watch a movie together, the space of thinking becomes collectivized. Of significant importance is how consciousness reacts to what is going on, for consciousness can transform space, including the physical space. It suffices consciousness to send an action impulse, and space changes. For those who are being resurrected, space, in a sense, as if is growing. For the ones being resurrected, space is growing on the inside of each cell, of every microelement, of every informational tie, and growing, building up. It fills up the informational structure of the one being resurrected. Thus, in this case, space is also an element of action. I have developed and to a certain extent implemented technological devices meant for the regeneration of the lost organs and the resurrection of people. Inside them, space is compressed to such a degree that the macro level becomes the micro level. That is, consciousness detects both micro and macro processes simultaneously. These technological devices allow to completely restore the entire body, to resurrect a person, and I mean precisely the resurrection, because the spiritual structure of the person is fully identical, is the same. The primary advanced future-oriented function of such devices is the realization of the algorithm, which allows by analogy to evolve consciousness of a person up to the point when the matter can be fully restored. As we can see, in this case, space can be regarded as a working tool for the creation of technological cycles on the resurrection. People often talk about parallel worlds, about parallel spaces. In actual fact, there's nothing parallel in particular. It is just that one and the same spatial region, even one and the same point, may contain everything. To be more exact, everything can be the manifestation of the collective consciousness in that point. One of the well-known guests visiting our space is Yeti, the snowman. He represents a version of man. They are those who acquired a modified form on account of the transmutation elements. That is, on account of trance states that acquired a mutational parameter and as a result transitioned to a different space. So they have separated from man, and their evolution has followed a different path. Where they have a flat, infinite Earth, and it is quite cold there, sometimes they fall out into our space, and then one may meet them, but in principle, they are beings from another world. Other well-known visitors of the Earth are the UFO, unidentified flying objects, crews. The UFOs are mainly artificially created objects, which are either alien or have to do with the problem of other spaces. That is, such observable objects do not necessarily come from other planets. It can be just the result of the visualization of other spaces. People piloting UFOs, or it is better to say, things, are representatives of other civilizations and have an appearance of man-like looking objects, biological or of a higher level. The UFOs themselves are mostly perceived as spheroidal disks, though generally they may be arbitrary shape. It is just through the structure of our space that they are perceived in precisely this way. An interesting question is the question of dimension of different spaces. In order to better understand it, let's consider a specific example, an organization of a human body. It is known that within human consciousness, many bodies are manifested physical, ethereal, astral, mental, and others. A well-known matryoshka, inside which there are smaller and smaller matryoshkas, is in reality a symbol of how man is organized. His bodies, specified above, are each in its space. The physical space, which we observe with our normal physical sight, in its simplified version is three-dimensional. That is precisely how it is seen by a person having an ordinary state of consciousness. But for a person processing a higher state of consciousness, the physical space can be four-dimensional as well. Remember Apostle Paul's statement given in the introduction. Ethereal space can be seven-dimensional, astral space, ninth-dimensional, and the structure of the mental space is twofold. It exists both as six-dimensional and as fourth-dimensional versions. But I would like to caution you regarding the following. By no means consider the dimensions I spoke about above to be fixed once and for all. These dimensions are as such today, but they may change tomorrow. The true life moves on. It consists in continuous evolution of the spirit. I would like to emphasize that in particular. Spiritual growth, spiritual evolution makes it possible to see the dynamics of this process, which in its turn facilitates the development of the spiritual structure. As for the dimensions, the following needs to be considered. Since the spiritual structure includes all known phenomena, it can translate one dimension into another. So the concept of dimension of different spaces is not that important. The main thing is that the spiritual structure is changeable. It can evolve. And it is the spiritual structure that determines all the rest. Time. There is more than one way to answer the question, what time is, depending on the perspective taken to consider this question. There is also an approach according to which time, in its ordinary understanding, simply does not exist. But however, it will be an approach from the perspective of higher states of consciousness. In such states of consciousness, the world perception is entirely different. I have talked about it in the introduction. In this book, or in this reading, I will confine myself just to the initial steps in covering the issue of time. There are several different approaches to consider. One approach was already mentioned when Principle 1.15 was discussed. Namely, time may be considered as a certain space transformer. In this case, time may be seen as certain spatial lines of force, along which transformation and movement take place. If we understand this time structure, then the emergence of the required space, as well as the fulfillment of the desirable event, in the right time and the right place, can be achieved. So the change of time results in space transformation. But a reverse version is possible as well. By changing space, time can be changed. It could be expected, for both of these structures, space and time, are the constructs of consciousness. We may consider the question of time perception by the gone ones, or by the ones being resurrected. Here, different aspects may be emphasized too. In the next part, for example, we will be noted that at first, for the one being resurrected, time is discrete, while for the living one, it is continuous. But the most important in this matter is that for the gone ones as well as for the ones being resurrected, time always moves towards live people, toward the living, and thus they all have only one path to follow, which is always only towards life. We may say that the gone ones perceive time as the flow of certain information, as a flow of a river that pushes them towards life. At present, there is very little room left for them. They are involuntarily being drawn closer to one another. They are getting increasingly squeezed. And for the new gone ones, there's virtually not enough room. When the resurrection of a person takes place, a sort of pushing out towards the living is manifested quite unequivocally too. The ones being resurrected have a feeling that the structure of the entire reality constantly moves under them. It moves only in one direction, with greater or lesser speed, and it always moves towards life. That is, in principle, the state of the gone ones, according to their subjective perception, is very unstable, and there is a good reason for it. Before, during the pre-nuclear epoch, many of the gone ones used to choose a path of reincarnation, the reincarnational system of their development. That is why they would somewhat distance themselves from this flow of time. They would form the events for their return, and only after that would enter the body which would have been formed in advance, a born fetus. Now, during the nuclear epoch, due to the threat of a possible universal nuclear annihilation, the gone ones, as a result of such a state of affairs, experience considerable instability, and thus more and more of them begin to orient themselves towards the resurrection. So now they do not distance themselves from this flow of time. And that is why we may see that time virtually is the structure of existence of some of the gone ones, and some of the ones being resurrected. We may even say of many of them, but not all. Not all of them, since the most enlightened ones can control the situation and find their way out of their own. Those who do not know the structure find themselves within very strong flows of time. I will remind you that these flows always move towards life. I would like to single out another very important aspect. After the resurrection occurred, the information of the resurrected one allows many other absolutely unrelated people in totally different locations to begin to live, as a result of which space increases. The number of people increases, leading in its turn to new resurrections. That is, the process develops like a snowball. Even one single resurrectant can reproduce in space on account of information exchange. Many new people, and not based on information creation, but just based on information communication. The soul of the resurrected one, knowing that it is possible to resurrect the gone ones, gives other people this chance, the chance to come back to life. Here is how it is done. The soul of a resurrected one creates a shape in space, or it is better to say a human contour, and in many ways it is the contour of the resurrected one himself. A week after the resurrection, a single soul is able to create 2 such contours. In a month, many times more. Within this contour, there is an available path, indispensable life conditions, all necessary events, so that when the gone one finds himself inside this shape, his resurrection takes place. And as a rule, the fact that the gone one finds himself in this contour is not accidental. He scans space, and then he detects such available contour, or, in other words, an available space-time cell. He enters it, and then his resurrection takes place. I will note that such a contour from this state pertains to the status of the one who performed the resurrection. For example, I resurrected a person. This is Grigori Grabovoi's writing. Further, the resurrection begins to develop space. Deep down, it is my status, my information, but it started developing because the resurrected one sent a new impulse to the world, and the impulse creates new space, new people. As I repeatedly was saying, the resurrection is always very beneficial for all, for the ones being resurrected as well as for the living, who receive additional space and additional positive events. And it should be added that there is a very important law consisting in that, in presence of a proven resurrection technology, lifetime lengthens of itself to the infinity. So the resurrection space begins to increase, and lifetime becomes infinite. I can tell you how the contours actually get occupied. Let's say I have resurrected a person, and now I am walking along a street, and suddenly see a contour. The contour that looks very much like this resurrected. And somebody, for example, a gone one, often before my very eyes, gets inside this contour, and the resurrection takes place. But the one who gets into the contour does not have to necessarily to be a gone one. It can be a living one too, who experienced a discontinuation of his events. He gets into this contour in this area, into the cell of time-space, and resumes living on. We will come back to this issue when we discuss Principle 4.3. We will now continue. The principle of immortality, and therefore the principle of restoration, regeneration after a possible biological death, is embodied in the primordial cause, in the primordial nature of impulses of man's natural development. 2.4. Man's natural development is in principle in harmony with the entire world, and the world is eternal. The very fact of the existence of the world is an element of eternity. That is why immortality is intrinsically embodied in the primordial nature of impulses of man's natural development. An impulse aimed towards the resurrection is always aimed towards the infinite development of the one being resurrected. 2.5. The resurrection methodology is based on the interconnections of consciousness of the one performing the resurrection, not only with the one being resurrected, but also with all the events related to him. What is meant, therefore, is as follows. When the resurrection takes place, the impulse of consciousness of the one performing the resurrection must be directed not only towards the realization of the resurrection act, that is, towards the creation, for example, of the physical tissue, but it must be applied to the entire course of events for the one being resurrected, must specify the entire course of these events. Generally speaking, any impulse is usually aimed to encompass events, but with respect to the resurrection, this impulse is of a specific nature. It is always toward the infinite evolution of the one being resurrected. If the realization of certain events unrelated to the resurrection is needed, then the impulse sent first leads to shaping a certain event, as a result of which other events are shaped based on the existing connections. It is different when performing the resurrection. The impulse aimed towards the resurrection is of a generalized character. It is always directed towards the infinite development of the one being resurrected in each event. The one being resurrected always sees and is aware of the resurrection process, and he always actively participates in the resurrection as an initiative person. 2.6. The resurrection is a process which is always agreeable and right, for it is directed towards life and provides an optimal path of development. The one being resurrected is always fully aware and in control of this process, and besides, I will note, there is not a single case, not a single fact of the gone one to refuse the resurrection when offered. Quite the opposite. I can say that the gone ones always gratefully accept the offer to be resurrected. The matter is many of them do not have the knowledge with the help of which their consciousness could restore the physical tissue. That is why when they receive an offer from someone else to be resurrected, they gratefully accept it. And I must say, the offer is always accepted by them immediately. I am telling about it so that it should be clear that ethically, one may always resurrect with a clear conscience, and moreover, any number of people. The main thing is that simultaneously with the resurrection, optimal supportive environment for normal living should be ensured for these people. The one being resurrected always knows for a fact that after the resurrection, he will live as a normal person. 2.7. The one being resurrected always thinks that the living one will treat him as equal. He does not feel separated from the living in any way, and he feels like a normal person, no different from the living. 2.8. It may be specified that the one being resurrected always knows that after the resurrection, he will live as a normal person in his normal biological body. I will note that during the resurrection, the main focus for the one being resurrected is the focal aspects of the resurrection process itself. He does not follow the technical details of the resurrection. The reason the one being resurrected does so is to understand the procedure in terms of control, and thus later to be able to resurrect other people on his own. I've already mentioned that sometimes for the sake of salvation, an instant resurrection is necessary. in which case there's no time to attend to the technical details, and in general, understanding general principles should always be a priority. I must say that at the informational level, the one who experienced death will differ for some time from the one who did not experience it. The difference is that the one who did not experience death has an entirely transparent informational matrix, which has a free access to all forms of consciousness and matter, while the matrix of the resurrected one has structures associated with an element of matter destruction. This element is more vicious, more ballast, and as a result, the consciousness of the resurrected one has a certain delay, for example, in the processing speed of information. But in any case, the resurrection is much better than reincarnation, considerably better. Because after the resurrection, a person masters the instrument of continuous life and does not die anymore. While in reincarnation, though with some exceptions, but for the majority we talk about a totally different person, often with different physical parameters. And in general, as I've stated earlier, at present reincarnation is becoming inexpedient. At the current stage of development, it is the resurrection that is becoming a natural process. The one who did not experience death will always master the process of control and the resurrection much faster than the resurrected one. For the process of the body disintegration represents a certain disintegration of the intellectual form, which leads, as I have just said, to change in the informational personality matrix. In addition, the body disintegration also means loss of time, as the living one during this time has an opportunity to continuously enhance his potential and increase the concentration of his consciousness. Progress, slowdown, due to the body disintegration, may be compared with the effects of a common illness on school studies. If a student suddenly had to be hospitalized on account of a serious illness, he is clearly at a disadvantage compared to those who are able to continue their studies. However, and I would like to particularly emphasize that after some time, though it may take quite a while, the resurrected on account of a generalized status becomes a complete match to the one who did not experience death. Since life is imperishable, since it is eternal, after some time, this is only but a detail for a person if his body has ever gone through disintegration or not. In general, this is not an issue for anybody anymore, the only exception being the structure of the world's stability, which needs the ones who did not experience death. That is exactly why at present the problem of immortality becomes so important. Immortality comes into existence when the resurrection technology becomes known. After the resurrection, it is necessary to provide some guidance to the resurrected one, explaining his new state, attributable to the fact that now he has a physical body. 2.9. And it has been already said, the gone ones consciously perceive the state they find themselves in after their body disintegration or after its cremation. They take this stage of their life as a phase of the events pertaining to their body. And when the process of the resurrection is over and they acquire a physical body, they clearly realize man's indestructibility. This knowledge of indestructibility of people, of immortality, is always in the soul of every person, but which, may be, not everyone would recognize. After the resurrection, the resurrected ones come to realize this knowledge of indestructibility, but only as a one-time act, while the one who did not experience death has this knowledge as a result of continuous flow of life. It is the knowledge of man's indestructibility, which is a means of reproduction of life of his physical body. The resurrected one must perceive the knowledge of indestructibility the same way the one who did not experience death does. After regaining his physical body, the resurrected one has to adapt himself to the conditions of life. Thereby, it is necessary to provide guidance for the resurrected to help them adapt themselves to social norms. Generally, they understand it all because they are normal, sensible people, and they may naturally say that they will manage on their own. But nevertheless, whatever is necessary for them to know must be verbalized. Yes, logically they understand it all, but the word of the living one contributes immensely to the adaptation of their consciousness to the environment. First, there was a word. The living one, the one who did not experience death, must verbalize everything. With the proper guidance provided to the resurrected one, his transition from the state of the gone ones to the state of the living significantly accelerates. The adaptation time could take up to a month, sometimes longer. However, sometimes it is an instant transition. Much is determined by the level of the reasoning ability of the resurrected one. The level of the reasoning ability of the resurrected one depends on how much was done in his environment as well as within his body. Of course, the resurrected one has his own reasoning ability. However, during the resurrection, in a certain sense, as if the shaping of his reasoning ability takes place, a certain technology is communicated to him by the one performing the resurrection. So the reasoning ability of the resurrected one depends on the work done on his resurrection. I will note that as a result of this work, the reasoning ability of the resurrected one may virtually stay the same, but it depends to a great degree on the quality and the amount of work done. And this work determines his ability to quickly adapt himself to his life in the society. In my system, Grigori Grabovoi's, I introduced the following concept: a level of reasonableness of an emerging object, because a resurrected one is in many ways an emerging object. The introduction of this concept, that is the level of reasonableness, allows the possibility for classification. Depending on his level of reasonableness, the resurrected one may be attributed to one or another category of people. As a rule, it is the same category he was attributed to before. Thus, the level of reasonableness determines the initial level the resurrected one starts his life with, now in a physical body. If immediately after the resurrection, the level of reasonableness of the resurrected one is quite high, his chances for fast adaptation are higher, and it may occur, let's say, within a second, an hour, or a day. But if his initial level is not very high, the adaptation can take, on average, a month, but no longer than 3 months. From the above follows a very important fact, and I would like to emphasize it. The one who works on the resurrection paves the way for the one being resurrected. A resurrected person fully retains his professional and other skills acquired earlier in life. 2.10. The content of the statement above is a well-established fact. The concept of spirit provides the truth of the structure of cognition. 2.11. The spiritual aspect always, in the resurrection too, allows for control of matter and cognition. The cognition structure becomes true when we are aware of the spiritual aspect instead of accentuating solely the resurrection in the physical body. And it is of fundamental importance that the creation of the physical body matching the same soul takes place. Virtually, during the resurrection of a person, a communication of spiritual knowledge to that person occurs, based on which the soul regenerates its physical part. Thus, the cognition structure becomes true when spiritual and physical structures are combined together. One of the aspects of resurrection is restoration of creative consciousness of living people. 2.12. Creative consciousness is in principle inherent in man from the very start of his life. When the body grows, for some time it always creates, until it gets into the system of artificial ideological postulates, far-fetched thought forms, wrong mental sets, which block the development of the body's ties, etc. All this artificially distorts the normal, natural development and results in clouding man's creative consciousness. That is why the task of reclaiming the creative consciousness of living people is of prime importance. One of the methods to achieve this goal is meditation, which has been already talked about in the introduction. The universal method is the practice of the resurrection, which realizes immortality. After man's creative consciousness has been reclaimed, restored, he begins to understand how he himself is organized, and as a result, he is able to resurrect other people by communicating this impulse to them. The resurrection process should be regarded at the same time as a process of reproduction of a fetus as well. 2.13. This principle has been formulated in terms of life arrangement and management for the resurrected one. When, according to a biological law, a fetus comes into existence from a man and a woman, a living space for its growth and development is reserved. It is expected from the start that later it will have a legal document, etc. The process of the resurrection should be regarded in much the same way. That is, different organizational aspects should be thought of carefully in advance, though, as it was specified in Chapter 1, The key aspects in the resurrection are controlled by the world structures named in that chapter. The spiritual development of the gone ones does not stop. Personal spiritual development always continues at all times. Therefore, at spiritual level, the resurrection is understood as the manifestation of the universal world harmony. And that is precisely why, on the spiritual level, all people know that the universal resurrection of the gone ones is to come. 2.14. The world is designed so that man primordially possesses the soul, the God's creation, and man's body is a physical part of the soul. Before, the physical soul was not regarded as a universally necessary element, and thus a biological death meant only a certain status of the soul, when the soul evolution continued in the absence of the physical body. And in the meantime, we know that the spiritual and physical structures are interdependent. See Principle 2.2. The presence of the physical body enhances a faster evolution of the soul. And now, when the world is faced with the threat of global destruction, this problem, the problem of a faster evolution of man, becomes very urgent. At present, there is a conflict among people or countries. Sometimes they resort to force to resolve the problem. Often, a biological death of an enemy is used to avoid the necessity of attending to the substance of the matter. In actuality, it means avoidance of the problem resolution, refusal to fundamentally address the problem. Now, the priority must be given to the physical body, which must become indestructible. As a result, development of means of destruction will become illogical and just meaningless. Because envisioned by God, man is eternal, and thus the task now is to reveal again the knowledge about the Creator on a wider scale, and to give back to the people the consciousness of the true level of eternity. In this regard, the resurrection is seen as a return to the understanding of eternity of the world. The resurrection is perceived as the manifestation of the universal harmony of the world. At heart, all people know that the universal resurrection of the gone ones is to come, for the soul is the reflection of the entire world. It interrelates with the entire world. Creating the eternal soul, God created an eternal effect of this soul. That is, we may say that He created an eternal body as an eternal part of the soul.